everybody, it's Wednesday night. You know what that means. It's time for the DFS Pick 6, RotoWorld's DFS Pick 6, presented by RotoGrinders. I'm Eric Crane, and that guy laughing right there, that's Evan Silva. Mr. Silva, how we doing, buddy?
We're doing all right, man. Just, telling some pre-show jokes. Did anybody tweet this out? I need to retweet it.
Here, let me tweet it out real quick, because, the Silva bump on Twitter is real. Seriously, if Evan retweets, he's, good for 15 followers minimum. So I'm going to go ahead and tweet it out. While I'm doing that, Reeves, how you doing, man?
Doing real good. I was talking to Rochelle, and I'm pretty glad we spent all of, 45 seconds talking about Calvin Ridley last week.
Had we spent, that's better than 0 seconds. We could have just spent 20 minutes on a game and then just never mentioned Calvin Ridley. Obviously, he went off for 3 scores last week. And, it was last week kind of went how we thought it was going to. A lot of points for the Chiefs. Oh, yeah. A lot of points in that Atlanta-New Orleans game. Evan, unfortunately, you didn't actually need any of the Chiefs guys to take down tournament. It was kind of an interesting week. Evan?
Yeah, very, very interesting. I had 10% Calvin Ridley. I had a great lineup with Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley together. But, of course, I had friggin' Latavius and Vikings defense in the same lineup, and of course was able to win nothing with that. But it was fun just to be kind of on that. Calvin Ridley going forward is going to be very interesting. He really was not a factor in the preseason. Even in week 1, it didn't look like he was going to be a factor, but every week it has grown a little bit. And last week it got to the point where the Saints were he was so dominant in that game that in the second half, they took Marshawn Lattimore, their number 1 corner, pulled him off of Julio, and put him on Calvin Ridley. Okay?
That's bizarre.
Calvin Ridley, in terms of his skill set and the way that he plays, reminds me a lot of old Chad Ochocinco, super quick in a short area. This week going to be running most of his routes against Dre Kirkpatrick, more of a stiff, upright cornerback for the Bengals who has been struggling. It's really a mismatch again in Calvin Ridley's favor. He's obviously not going to produce like he did last week, and his ownership will probably still be too high. And, hey, this is an incredibly high-variance sport. But, man, he's got another really good matchup on deck at the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta.
Yeah, and, this isn't – Calvin Ridley didn't come out of nowhere. Atlanta spent a lot of draft capital on him. He was a top receiver coming out of high school over in Alabama. So I could definitely see him, emerging. And, hey, who knows, Reeves? Maybe we'll get Julio a touchdown if people are focusing on Calvin Ridley.
At this point, I don't know if we can hold our breath for it, but I like Julio. I think we're going to talk about that game. Is it that game on the slate?
It is.
Are we just doing it now?
No. We're going back because we're talking about the game that we love as fantasy players, but literally nobody's going to go to. It's Houston at Indianapolis, 47-point total. Indianapolis at home, they're 1.5-point favorites. And Reeves, it's weird because I think people are going to look at this game and say, all right, I want these Houston pieces. I want some Deshaun Watson. I want DeAndre Hopkins. I want Will Fuller. And I can't help but feel that even though Indianapolis is favored, people don't really love the Indianapolis side. What do you think about the Colts side here?
Yeah, the Colts side is tricky just because there really is no run game what to speak of, and they're running out like a hodgepodge of guys trying to just try to get something by. They tried to run for about 2 possessions last game and just chalked that up. They knew they weren't getting anywhere on the Eagles front. They lost their right tackle, their second right tackle for the season. I think Joe Haig's coming back at some point, but he got knocked out of the game last week. And Denzel Good came in and was just getting dominated. He's going to go up against J.J. Watt this week. And J.J. Watt kind of came back to life like Evan said he would against the Giants offensive line. It's a similar spot for J.J. Watt in this one. But, the Colts just don't have a lot of attractive individual pieces. They're kind of they've got T.Y. Hilton, who they've kind of relegated into a possession type receiver. His ADOT is 8 yards right now, T.Y. Hilton. The T.Y. Hilton we've grown to love throughout our life. The guy that gets in the slot and just runs vertical routes off of guys is averaging 8 yards a target. That's what this new offense and catering to Andrew Luck's noodle arm has gone to. But T.Y. Hilton is a guy that historically has roasted the Texans. He's got 500-yard games against them. 25% of his career touchdowns have come against the Texans. The Texans aren't good. They just woke up the dormant New York Giants offense, defensively a week ago. It's just really Hilton. I think if Doyle's out, I think Ebron will be interesting to see if people want to go back to him because Ebron left a lot of meat on the bone, like Ebron is prone to do. But listen, Ebron had 11 targets. He had 3 end zone targets. He almost had a couple touchdowns in that game. It just didn't work out. And the Texans have just been dreadful guarding tight ends out of the gate. 13 of 14 targets the tight ends have been completed, almost 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. It'll be curious to see if Doyle's out, if anyone goes back to it. Luck, I think, is fine to, like, hey, it's like QB2 opportunity and, like, redraft. But, like, DFS, I mean, I'm not going around that boat.
Yeah, I mean, Evan, what do you think about Andrew Luck? Because obviously, it's been everybody knows by now that he's struggling to throw down the field. He's not really throwing down the field at all. Do you think this is going to be an issue long term for Luck, Evan?
Well, I was pretty skeptical of Andrew Luck just entering the season. So I don't want to get like caught up in taking like a victory lap for that. His highest weekly finish so far is quarterback 11. And I was skeptical of him entering the season, but I don't want that to, when we play daily fantasy, it's a week to week game. And I don't want, that to like, infringe upon my view of him on a weekly basis. This Texans defense is very, very beatable. Okay. We just saw Eli Manning finish as a top 12 fantasy quarterback against them. Their outside cornerbacks are bad. Okay, they lost Kevin Johnson early in the season. They've been using Kareem Jackson, a safety / slot corner on the outside. Jonathan Joseph I think he's washed. He's 35 years old. On the other side, T.Y. Hilton's going to be matching up against those guys. Eric Ebron can't possibly do worse than he did last week. T.Y. Hilton has a great history, not only against the Texans, but of also just playing at home at Lucas Oil Stadium. And Andrew Luck, although he has not been stretching the field, he is 6th in the NFL in pass attempts. I am going to have at least one tournament team with Andrew Luck plus T.Y. Hilton and or Eric Ebron this week for sure. I think that Andrew Luck will probably be way underowned. What to me has been a little bit concerning is that Andrew Luck has not really been running a whole lot. Last week he did rip like a 30-yard run, but before that he had, I think, 9 yards in 2 games. But maybe breaking that long run will give him some more confidence to run. That's always been like an underrated part of his game. And now there are like all these questions about him, and it's like a big narrative because of the pulling him for the Hail Mary in favor of Jacoby Brissett. So I'm definitely going to have at least one significant tourney team with Andrew Luck plus T.Y. Hilton and or Eric Ebron this week. I mean, I think it's a great week to pivot onto that in a great matchup at home.
Well, and then if you're going to play that, I assume, Reeves, who are we going to run it back with on Houston? Because I'll tell you what, the Houston Texans side seems a heck of a lot more obvious than the Indianapolis Colts side because, you can play T.Y. Hilton, you can play DeAndre Hopkins, you can play Will Fuller. I mean, there are a number of options on Houston that are going to be popular, and Reeves, I think they're really good plays.
Yeah, I think that you'll see Will Fuller. I had a lot of Will Fuller last week, just kind of riding the wave, and his price is going to continue to spike like it did this week. A lot of people are just going to keep riding him, and he scored in every game now with Deshaun Watson, and we talked about it last week. It's not that he's just catching these bombs either. He's starting to stack like really productive games. He's got 5 or more catches now in the last 3 games he played Watson. He's going over 100 yards in all those games. He's getting short yardage near the goal line targets now. I mean, it's all just manifested into him being the type of player he was, at Notre Dame now. And he's just going to be a guy that people want to own. Hopkins has been like a little quiet, but I mean, this was what you expected from Hopkins coming in this year. He wasn't going to score touchdowns at the rate he did last year. I think his like over under coming into the year was like 9.5, like in most books. So he's kind of on that trajectory, but he's still got double-digit targets every game. This team also is just bad, like Evan said. Like they've trailed every offensive snap. They're the only team in the league that hasn't had the lead while they've had the ball. And Deshaun Watson hasn't really done anything outside of the fourth quarter. Every game he has done every game. I think he's done 1 touchdown outside of the fourth quarter this season. So it's been a lot of just junk script. Kind of getting his yards, but he's stacking yards. And the cool thing is he averages 40 yards rushing per game, real safe. I think he's just a real viable, again, his price really didn't move. He's viable if you want to run him out in cash and not pay up for the top guys. But this is a great quarterback week. We'll be talking about guys for sure on this slate because there are just a plethora of passing options that you don't really have to pay for. Whereas last week, everyone wanted to jam Mahomes in. I couldn't jam Mahomes in. I just couldn't make it happen last week. And luckily it worked out. Watson was the guy. I played it cash. And it just, again, you just have to not watch the first 3 quarters of football and get your stats.
It just gets depressing at that point.
But it's really just those guys.
It's like the old Russell Wilson rule.
Yeah. Just wait till the fourth quarter. That's kind of where we are. And they have a lot of overlap into their games, how they play now. Like, except for Russell's not really running this year. But, I mean, it's just – that's it. They want to play that YOLO ball, chunk plays. They'll sacrifice possessions where they punt for 4 possessions in a row, but they're going to have that one, they're going to hit that money ball or, push the ball downfield. That's kind of how they've been operating. And then Crane will probably try to sell us on Lamar Miller again, but that's not.
No, I'm done.
Crane,
like, I'm just finished, man. The guy sucks. Like, I don't want to play any more Lamar Miller. You're not going to hear me talk about him anymore. I'm trying to
every week, Crane. You are killing my bankroll with this Lamar Miller love.
It made sense, And you know what? I haven't honestly, man. I look at a lot of matchups, and this is what I forget sometimes. I like talent. Like I feel like I look at matchups too much, and I don't look at whether somebody's a good football player enough as much as I should. Lamar Miller, let's just face it, he's not a good football player. I'm done. I'm finished. All right, Evan, I'm saving your bankroll right now. I'm here for you, buddy.
Well, ever since you won the Millie with Mohamed Sanu, I don't know if you really love talent.
I don't know. I fell in love with Dante Moncrief late last week. How did that work out?
Oh, God.
Goodness gracious.
He has like 220 air yards.
DM us whenever you find yourself in a dilemma like that. Just hit us with a DM, please.
You got my back?
Yes.
I appreciate that. No, I'm done with Lamar Miller. And as far as this Indianapolis running game, like, we're all just washing our hands at this, right? Like, I mean, I know some people are talking about Hines, but I'm just not going here. Evan, are you have any interest in this Indianapolis running game?
No. What I wanted to talk about, though, is that the Colts have done a good job of limiting big plays. Okay. And if you go back and Reeves really beat the drum for this entering the season, that Matt Eberflus, the Colts' new defensive coordinator, a disciple of Rod Marinelli, who's a disciple of Tony Dungy, originator of like the Tampa 2 cover 2 defense. That was the kind of scheme that the Colts were going to install this year, and they have. And if you think about what the cover 2 really tries to emphasize is trying to lengthen drives. You're playing 2 safeties deep, okay? You are not giving up big plays. You're trying to win with your front 4, which they kind of have. They're 4th in the NFL in sacks. Margus Hunt is incredible on a tear. But you win with your front 4. You have speed on the second level. That would be Derek Brooks for the old Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That would be Darius Leonard for today's Indianapolis Colts. And you make tackles on the back end, and you try to make teams have 10, 12 play drives. You not give up big plays. And the Colts have been excellent at that, despite having Pierre Desir, who's like on his 6th NFL team, and Nate Hairston, who played slot corner for them last year. Those are their outside corners. They have not been giving up big plays. So if you just want to think like theoretically and schematically about, hey, how would the Texans tear this defense apart, it would be in the short to intermediate range. And, DeAndre Hopkins on the boundary, and sleeper Ryan Griffin, who apparently some sharp dudes were on last week. I know that I talked on the Swolecast, and Mr. Tuttle brought him up, and Mr. Tuttle is super, super smart. But I think that Ryan Griffin actually is interesting this week. If you look at what Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert did to the Colts zone defense last week, just smashed it. And Ryan Griffin he's number 14 among tight ends in the NFL in routes run.
All right, I can get behind Ryan Griffin. Why not? I mean, again, I'm better than Lamar Miller, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm all fine with Ryan Griffin. Anybody else that you're interested in today or in this slate, Reeves?
No, that's pretty much it. We know the main guns here.
All right, well, let's move on to the Bengals and the Falcons. And of course, the Falcons, they're a mainstay in this segment because we love talking about Falcons game. Defense is banged up. They pass a lot. They score a lot of points. Bengals, the 4.5-point underdogs in Atlanta, 52.5-point total. And look, this Falcons offense almost was what we thought it was. We thought they were going to pass for a bunch of touchdowns. Just none of it went to Julio, shockingly. And, Reeves, this Falcons offense, like, they're just going to keep passing the ball. Tevin Coleman's going to keep getting the rock. Enough for me as long as Devontae Freeman's out. So what are you looking for with Atlanta here? Because Cincinnati's defense, I actually kind of respect it.
You said you respect it?
Yeah.
Oh no, they're horrible.
All right, fine. I think they got the pieces to be better than they've shown.
I expected
that is
to
true.
respect it.
Yeah.
I expected to respect it.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like they're going to bounce back. Like there's no way they're this bad. How about that?
Maybe when they get back, Vontaze perfect. Maybe.
Yeah. Until he gets suspended.
Again. But
Yeah,
I mean, if you go back to last year, so the Bengals now have allowed a top 13 fantasy quarterback all 3 weeks this year. And if you go back to last year, it's in 8 of their past 9 games. Like they were dreadful to finish last year in terms of pass defense. And it's rolled right over to this year. I mean, if Cam had to throw in that game and he didn't have to throw, like that defense made Christian McCaffrey. We remember what Christian McCaffrey at Stanford looked like last week. Like he was ripping off runs. He had more rushing yards than he probably had his last 6 or 7 games combined. In the NFL, in that game, and he was ripping off chunk plays. This defense, like I said, going back to last year, has really struggled. Like you said, they've got some pieces. They should be better than what they are, but they forced a punt the fewest amount in the NFL. Like teams are just driving on them, not giving up the rock on them at any point in the game. Matt Ryan's coming off 2 games at home. They're home again for the 3rd week in a row. He's had 2 just monster games at home, and he's really gone away from that. You look at the past 2 games, it's because he's involving everyone. Everyone's getting the rock now in Atlanta, and it's like the year he won MVP. I mean, Julio had a bunch of targets, but a bunch of other guys were involved, and you're starting to see that again. Calvin Ridley emerged. Austin Hooper has 3 targets inside the 10-yard line. Like, no one ever really wants to play Austin Hooper on paper. Like, everything's here. Like, we know Matt Ryan's probably going to be good. The Bengals still don't have Vontaze perfect. They've been getting torched by tight ends. The only tight end they stopped was Ian Thomas, who just wasn't involved in the game plan, and the Panthers didn't have to throw. So, I mean, like, Austin Hooper's on the board in this game. Everyone's on the board for the Falcons. And if Freeman's out, then Coleman's still on the board. He was kind of disappointing last week in that shootout, but at least he found the end zone for one time. But, when we get to the Bengals side, it's literally the Falcons, I think it's just wheels up as usual in their 3rd straight home game against the defense that has just been getting torched in the past game.
You kind of mentioned that, like, Matt Ryan spreading that around it a little bit, and it's kind of it stinks for me because I like these offenses where there's just one receiver and I know who's going to get it. And Evan Julio, he's supposed to be that guy. Like, we were supposed to get that with Julio Jones, but last week and the week before, he just keeps disappointing me. He's suddenly Lamar Miller for me, Evan.
I mean,
whoa.
Crane. He really is like a classic like game theory play, though. I really believe that. And like last week, it seemed like everyone was on him. So I think that the best game theorist play was to not be on him, and now everyone's going to abandon him. So I think he becomes pretty interesting as a tournament play this week. What I really wanted to talk about is what Reeves touched on. The Bengals' interior run defense made Christian McCaffrey look like LaDainian Tomlinson last week. And they lost Ryan Glasgow, who is a key component of their interior run defense, to a torn ACL. And this will be the last week that they're without Vontaze Burfict. I've been on Tevin Coleman with moderate results each of the last 2 weeks. His price has not risen very much on FanDuel. I'm sticking with him this week. That I'm telling you that Bengals interior run defense got destroyed by the Panthers, who were without their stud right guard, Trey Turner, who have played musical chairs throughout the rest of their offensive line. This Falcons offensive line has been pretty darn good. I love Tevin Coleman as a play this week.
Yeah, and this is one of those rare games where you can actually be running backs from both sides because we like Tevin Coleman. We like the upside in both the passing and the receiving game. And then on the other side, Giovanni Bernard, I mean, against Atlanta, we all know what running backs have been doing against him. Reeves, can you think of a reason to fade Giovanni Bernard?
No, and like absolutely none, to be honest. I mean, we talked about them just not having any depth, and he handled 92% of the rushing attempts last week for the Bengals. We know he can't get scripted out of games. He's still getting goal. He got goal line work as evidence of last game, and we've seen, granted they faced Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara the past 2 weeks, but we talk about it every week on the show about Atlanta. I mean, this is the kind of defense they want to play. And you allow 14 receptions to a running back and follow up with 15 receptions to a running back. Clearly part of the game plan. Like McCaffrey is a little bit game script induced, but that was the Saints' game plan, was to just feed Kamara out in space in that game. And that's what the Bengals should look to do with Giovanni Bernard. I mean, especially if AJ Green's not going to be fully healthy. It sounds like he is. He's going to be good to go. But I mean, Gio should be a focal point of what the Bengals try to do offensively, and his price really didn't move off of last week, and they've already declared Mixon out. So I mean, I'm in full go. I don't say you really fade Gio in cash at all.
Yeah, I mean, in tournaments, like, he's so safe and he has upside. Last week, nearly 20 points, 9 targets, and just 61 rushing yards. I found the box once, but like, I mean, this guy has more upside. Like, this guy can hit 30, I think, and I think the floor is probably closer to like 12 or 13. I mean, Evan, it's really like it's a don't get cute spot with Gio, right?
Yeah, definitely. He was very close to having 2 touchdowns last week. They did like a play action fake with him where he just sort of walked in the end zone, but they threw it to CJ Uzoma, which obviously doesn't help anyone. But Gio literally would have just walked into the end zone on that play, and I thought he looked excellent. And Mark Walton had 1 carry. It didn't show up in the box score last week, but he had 1 carry, and he actually kind of looked good on the carry, but it was called back due to a penalty. So he wound up with 0 touches in the game, played 7 snaps. They just don't trust him at all, and I don't blame him because he stunk in the preseason. They don't trust him to pass protect. He barely made the 53. I think it's going to be a ton of Gio again this week, assuming that we don't see, and we're doing this show on Wednesday, assuming we don't see Joe Mixon come back and try to play this week, which I still think is a small possibility, but I do think it is a possibility because he was active on the side of today's practice, but that'll just be something to watch out for.
I'm going to be Joe Mixon, if you're watching, and I know you're a big fan of the show, don't come and play this week. Like, just don't do it. Just stay away. We'll take Gio. You mentioned AJ Green. He's potentially going to miss this game. Evan, what does it do to the Cincinnati passing attack if AJ Green is out?
Well, he practiced on Wednesday.
Okay.
So we are expecting him to play. It would be a surprise if he did not. I think either way, Tyler Boyd is an awesome fantasy start. I love Tyler Eifert on FanDuel. 4,600? Are you friggin' kidding me?
I love when we get the Silva whisper.
I know. I don't want to say it too loud.
I understand. Shh. That's
4,600 for Tyler Eifert. His playing time has been like this. His targets each week have been like this. Now he's facing a Falcons defense that has lost its middle linebacker and both of its starting safeties since the beginning of the year, and he's minimum price.
That's a pretty good combination. I mean, that's a wild price over on FanDuel, especially against a team like Atlanta where you just beat them in the middle of the field. And right. I mean, every year we get one of those like random Tyler Eifert 3 touchdown games. Like it happens.
He's got multiple tug potential.
Yeah, like every single year we get one of those, and I never know when it's coming. Maybe this is going to be the time when it's coming. Reeves, what about you? What do you think about this Bengals passing attack? Or is Andy Dalton just going to keep on crushing it for us?
Yeah, I mean, I like Eifert a lot, especially on FanDuel, like I said, where it's more touchdown-driven anyways inherently. And like Evan said, his routes, his snaps, everything's just gone up exponentially every week. He just, and if people see like a guy like Uzoma score a touchdown, they think, they don't bother to check. They just think, oh, well, Eifert's not healthy. He's not really getting the reps. So that's not the case at all. Yeah, Dalton on DK is really nice. I think he's clocking in around 5,400 over there. And he's got 15 plus points every game. If he didn't throw 4 picks last game, he would have had even more points. Kind of hurt himself a little bit there. But yeah, he for the price and the squeeze there, and you got this game, the total on this game is just risen so highly. I don't see any reason why you would run away from him over on DK. So things are a little more jumbled on FanDuel, where like every quarterback is priced like over that 500 range. But on DK, you look for those gaps. Like last week we said Matt Ryan was a clear gap. Why is he 57? Then it's kind of like that with Dalton this week. He's priced down with the Mayfields and guys like that. So I mean, he's a guy definitely you want to look to squeeze in and free up some cap.
Yeah, I've actually been picking up Dalton season long, just streaming him. Mainly my Jimmy Garoppolo teams. Oh, my Jimmy Garoppolo teams. You're my Andy Dalton teams, though. That's
good night, sweet prince.
Yeah, that's such a depressing thing to say out loud.
Oh, wait, Crane, you played season long this year and didn't get Pat Mahomes everywhere?
I got him most places. I didn't get him everywhere, though.
Neither did I.
Yeah, I know. I got him a lot of places, though. Like, if you look at my like my best balls, I'm completely loaded up on Mahomes and best ball. But like my 2 biggest leagues, I do not have.
What about Rex Burkhead?
I have more than I should, which is, likewise. I mean, I got excited. I mean, I don't know. Like, how are the season-long teams looking, Evan?
Pretty good. Yeah. Evan
beat me in the league by 2 points last week.
That's right. I looked at that score before and I was like, I'm done. But I
had Dan Bailey. I had Dan Bailey at the big.
He got a 0. We play kickers in that league. It's awful.
I mean, one of my teams it's 2-1 and it's not all that good, and the other team is 1-2 and it's probably the best. I've scored like 50 more points than anybody in the league, and I'm 1-2. Good times over there with the season-long crowd. All right, let's move on to our third game, and I kind of mentioned the Falcons. Every single slate. Well, we got Falcons in our discussion. Well, here are the Saints game. The Saints at the Giants, total of 50.5, and the Saints are 3.5-point favorites. And, the Saints, we saw Alvin Kamara get 15 catches. We see Michael Thomas crush it again. Like, Evan, the Saints, it's just the usual suspects here. So is there anything different than we're looking at with the Saints this week as opposed to different weeks? Evan? All right, Reeves, is there anything? Oh, there we go.
Sorry. No, nothing that, particularly stands out, I don't think. Obviously, this will be the last week that we get Alvin Kamara without Mark Ingram, and that next week will become, the hot debate, like how much work is Mark Ingram going to get? If you go back and look at last year, like they were really trying to transition to Alvin Kamara in this lead back role, and now their offense is really geared toward Alvin Kamara. So will they change that? I think Michael Thomas can just whip up on Janoris Jenkins. I don't even think that's a problem. Ted Ginn has been poor on the road as opposed to at home since he joined the Saints. Alvin, the Giants have given up 130 or more rushing yards in 2 of 3 games. And Alvin Kamara's, his passing game usage has just been incredible. He can work those linebackers. The question will be, and I would love to throw this to Reeves, do you expect a downturn in the Saints offensive production just because they're going on the road this week?
The old bugaboo. You look at Breeze. The past 3 years, he's had 15 games outdoors. He's been a QB1 in just 4 of them. It's kind of one of those. He's been in a lot of spots like this. Not a lot of great matchups and kind of underperformed. They're also a road team coming off overtime, which historically has been, kind of yielded lackluster results. I know they scored on the first drive in overtime, but that's what made Washington such a hot bet last week against the Packers. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I also think that, from the other side, like we don't have to go on this flying blind now, because it was going to be one of those where the Saints have been playing so bad defensively that we were going to have to try to make kind of an argument for the Giants guys based on matchup. But the Giants guys showed us last week that they actually played functional offense and could take advantage of a soft spot that, that we don't have to really try to, just mold that, just shape that up into just like a butt Saints defense type of an argument. Because I think the Giants are going to score points. They're going to move the ball well in this game. They've got a lot of interesting plays on their side. But, I mean, anytime you have just a hyper-concentrated offense like New Orleans kind of has right now, and, I mean, Drew Brees is Drew Brees, teams aren't really scared to give up that kind of production to guys. And the Saints are a team, too, that really haven't played on-script offense a lot. They have led for only 11 snaps the entire year. That's it, through 3 weeks. They've been playing a lot of catch-up. That's why you get a lot of Kamara dump-offs. You've had a lot of passing volume. That's why they've got a great offensive line. They haven't been able to establish the run at all or try to because they don't play with any favorable game script. They haven't in any of the games. The Cleveland game was the closest they came to do that, and they were even chasing points in that game in the second half. They were chasing scores. So it's interesting. I think Ben Watson's a little interesting. The Giants, I mean, on paper, look like they've improved against tight ends, but like they faced Austin Severius-Jenkins, Jeff Swaim, and Ryan Griffin to start the year. Not exactly a murderer's row, not exactly a daunting rogues gallery.
Hey, don't forget about the Griffer.
Not really anything to scare off. Ben Watson's actually been a tight end 1 in 2 of the 3 games that they've played now. I mean, it's fishing down the barrel. You're not gonna play him, but I mean, I'm trying to come up with something other than Kamara and Thomas. That's really all it is.
Yeah, I think Ben Watson is definitely in play.
You love Ben Watson.
I mean, hey, look,
he's a Silva staple.
He could have hit big against the Browns, except Breeze just missed him in the back of the end zone. I'm telling you, if Breeze would have hit him for that touchdown, everyone would be playing him this week.
I think it's perfect. Like, obviously Kamara and Thomas, those are the 2 guys we're looking at, right? The Saints offense revolves around those guys, but it's the secondary pieces. Cam Meredith came back last week. Traquan Smith, they said they were going to get him involved. Ben Watson, Ted Ginn. Like, Evan, how do we kind of sort through this just mess of Saints secondary options?
I mean, I think we just kind of did sort through it. I think it's, Kamara and Michael Thomas at the top, sort of looking at Ben Watson, and Cam Meredith and Traquan Smith have just not arrived. Like Ted Ginn at times when he's at home, but he's really done nothing on the road since he joined the Saints. On FanDuel, just eyeballing it, the first thing that my eyes trended toward at quarterback this week as a cash game play was Eli Manning.
Whew.
I know.
I mean, that's sad. It's not a fun button to click. How cheap is he? Hold on. You say I got to look at price.
71.
Is that enough of a discount though? Like,
yeah, I know.
I fully understand. Big total, home quarterbacks and big total that are underdogs have historically proven to really exceed value. And plus, it's not a secondary that we're scared of. Obviously, Marshawn Lattimore, he should be shadowing Odell, but Lattimore hasn't played all that well this year. So, like, I get what you're saying. Like, are we just going to load up on Eli to Odell teams maybe in tournaments?
Well, there are a bunch of different aspects that are interesting about the Giants passing game this week, okay? First of all, Eli got the ball out quickly last week. He had the shortest time to throw in the NFL last week at 2.4 seconds. Like you go and listen or you read like Bill Walsh, old books. His time was to get the ball out was 2.5 seconds. So Eli was beating that. In Eli's first 2 games, he was at 2.7 seconds. So he was over that. Okay. So he improved his time to throw. He still wound up taking friggin' 4 sacks. His offensive line is bad, and that is not going to change. But now he's facing a Saints defense that has gotten like no pressure at all, and is on the road. Offensive lines also tend to perform a little bit better when they're at home. The target distribution is a little bit more narrowed without Evan Ingram. Sterling Shepard is super interesting this week. The Saints just lost their slot corner, Patrick Robinson, to a broken ankle. And Sterling Shepard runs in the slot. So we kind of know where the ball is going to be going. We're not really afraid of Marshawn Lattimore this year. I mean, there's really been no reason to be afraid of him. Odell Beckham will certainly be shadowed by him. And then you have the fact that the Saints have been legit shutting down the run. I mean, crushing against the run, which I didn't expect to continue last week because they were without their starting middle linebacker and their starting nose tackle, but it continued. And I think that the best way for the Giants to play is to just play short passing offense, get the ball out of Eli's hands quickly, get it to Saquon, get it to Sterling Shepard, get it to Odell Beckham on the slants. And I think that they can win this game. I think that they can definitely win this game.
So, I mean, Reeves, are we interested in Saquon this week then against, you just said the Saints team, they've been good against the run, but at the same time, we know he's got some pass catching ability, and that's probably the best way for the Giants to go. Do you have a lot of interest in Saquon, Reeves?
He hasn't made a lot of initial builds, but I've mostly, earlier in the week, I mostly just focused on getting my cash lineup in order, and then I'll make the lineups, like you. I'm going to go on Saturday night and make, get that spread out those 100 lineups. But I mean, listen, he's got 20 touches in all 3 games, over 20 touches. He has a 100-yard rushing game. He has a 100-yard receiving game. And he has another game where he comboed up for 117 total yards. Like those aren't guys we just fade. Like, combo backs that can do it all and get a bunch of production, especially in a game where we think could have a shot to shoot out like 2 of the 3 Saints games have. Like Evan talked about Sterling Shepard. No Evan Ingram is a big deal because Sterling Shepard, when he had that juice, last year, guys were out of the lineup. The year before, when he was getting all those targets, it was just him and Odell. So you got target boost. They talk about Patrick Robinson. The Saints secondary has just been so bad. I always make the corollary a lot. We've done it, I think, on the show before where the Saints are good last year, but secondary play in the NFL is a lot like MLB bullpens. Like there's like guys that stay elite, but like usually there's like a lot of variance where like guys are good. And like Ken Crowley was a guy who balled last year. Was really good. But like if you were to ask anyone if Ken Crowley's like an elite talent, the answer would be unequivocally be like no one would think that he's like a corner you need to actively avoid. And he's clearly regressed this year. He's just been terrible the first 3 games. And they got PJ Williams on the field now, the kid from Florida State they drafted a couple years ago. He just got run in circles last week. And then you talk about Marshawn Lattimore. Combined, if you just look at what these guys have given up in coverage, PJ Williams on the year, 8 for 9, 161, 3 touchdowns. Crowley, 14 of 18, 295, 3 touchdowns. Lattimore, 10 of 12 targets completed for 175 yards and a touchdown. We're back to the Saints of old, baby. Like this is what we wanted. And like I said, we don't have to force feed just the Saints narrative because the Giants had a soft matchup last week on the road and they hit on it. They showed us they could hit. So I mean, we don't have to necessarily just dive in and hold our nose on just the matchup. So I mean, I think it's going to be hard to avoid Shepard where he's priced on both sites because of how we like to attack receiver play. Where we like to get the value, where we can buy targets. Like Tyler Boyd was that guy last week. Where we can buy targets at a reasonable price, and Shepard is that guy this week.
I haven't done this research yet, but didn't Shepard just crush last year whenever Ingram was out, or am I misremembering that?
Ingram was in every game. It was when
did I have it backwards?
When Sterling Shepard was healthy, which wound up only being like 4 or 5 games.
Okay.
And Odell Beckham was out. Sterling Shepard had some monster games for sure.
Yes, I mean it's really tough to imagine at least one of these guys are going to go off between Odell.
Oh yeah, we shouldn't ignore Odell either.
Is he good at football?
He's pretty decent. 200 yard games. He's been kind of quiet. Hasn't scored yet. Hasn't scored that touchdown yet, but he's had 200-yard games, a lot of volume every week, outside that Cowboys game. The Cowboys are kind of just a weird defense, man, for fantasy production because they make teams play slow. They're really frustrating. But, we talk about wheels up. The Saints have allowed 9 touchdowns to wide receivers already. They've allowed 5 pass plays of 47 yards or more. 4 of those have been touchdowns. Odell's gonna blow up one of these weeks for 160 or 180 and a long slant or something to the house and as good a week as any.
Yeah, I mean, one of Odell, Saquon, or Shepard are gonna have a massive game, and maybe 2 of them are gonna have a massive game. And to me, this is kind of gonna be one of my favorite games to stack up because the primary pieces, where they are, and that makes stacking a game really easy. It's going to be Kamara or Thomas on the Saints side. On the Giants side, it's going to be some combination of Odell, Shepard, and Saquon. So to me, you just kind of rotate around those guys. If you want to throw some Ben Watson there, of course, that's fine. But you kind of just focus on those guys, right, Evan?
Yeah, and again, this Saints pass defense was like top 5 in the NFL last year, and it's still like kind of difficult for me to digest because they went out and upgraded their personnel. I mean, they traded a future first-round pick to the Packers to move up for Marcus Davenport. I haven't seen Marcus Davenport. Like, he's been a ghost, man. He's been a ghost. And they signed Patrick Robinson, and he's now out for the year. They signed Kurt Coleman, not helping. They signed Demario Davis in the middle, hasn't been helping. So it's still kind of stunning to me that they all of a sudden reverted to the Saints defense of old, where they can't get any pressure. They can't cover anyone, but they are like a pass funnel because they're good at stopping the run. I mean, that's hot. That's hot for passing game members on the other side.
Yeah, and the Giants team, I mean, look, they just don't have the offensive line to combat that either. Like, it's the Giants are going to have to pass the ball. They might have to throw it 45 times in this game. To me, like, what's the price over there in Eli over in DK? Let me see. 5,600 for Eli. Oh, baby doll. All right, that's where I'm going to be looking at a lot of my teams because, again, I can just play a couple of these Giants guys and load up some guys on the Saints. And, my teams are easy that way. And then, look, by the way, for those of you who are worried, well, isn't Eli going to be chalky? Eli Manning is never chalky. It ain't going to happen this week. So, yeah, you feel free to load up on Eli over there. Let's talk about some other quarterbacks, guys. And
I want to predict a narrative that
I'm ready.
Entering week 5. Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
Because Sam Darnold is going to the Jaguars, and Eli Manning is about to bring the Giants to 2-2 with a win over the Saints.
Okay.
So the pro Giants should have taken the running back at 2 crowd is going to look really good after this week, and the pro, what are you thinking? Why did you not take a quarterback at number 2 in the best quarterback class, as judged by the NFL since 1983? They're going to be looking dumb entering week 5.
And those people are just going to take victory laps because obviously, two discussions like that should take 10 years to decide. Well,
remember when everyone said that a lot of these guys were going to sit this year? Guess what? They're all starting this week.
Except Lamar Jackson.
Well, yeah, that was a given. But everyone said, these guys were going to end up sitting out for a lengthy period of time. And a lot of these teams brought in place-holding quarterbacks. And listen, tales all the time, man. You can say whatever you want in the summer, man. When it comes time, these guys all find the field early in today's NFL.
I will say, like, what do we think the Cardinals are doing? Like, Josh Rosen's not playing. Evan, do you have a Cardinals rant for us?
Oh God, we kind of touched on it a little bit last week, didn't we?
No, not enough.
I said they deserve to lose every game this year.
Yeah, I just want more. I always want a silver rant. Like, life gets better when that happens.
Yeah, let's. I will prepare one for next week. How about that? If they lose, which they will.
Yeah.
They will, definitely.
Yeah, of course they will.
And,
I think Russ is going to light them up, by the way. I think Russ can have a really big game.
Dude, Russ always crushes the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, and it was kind of against a different, scheme, obviously, when they were running that man and they were running, Patrick Peterson on one side and Russ just kept airing it out to the other side. But, no, I mean, I think it's really interesting for Russ this week. And by the way, I mean, speaking of quarterbacks, Reeves, nobody's playing Russell Wilson. Nobody's been playing him all year. He hasn't looked great, even though he has to be the whole offense. And I still kind of believe in, the talent here is just too great for $5,600 over on DK. Like, this cheap quarterback range, to me, Reeves, it just screams like you need to pay down a quarterback this week.
Yeah, Doug Baldwin's practicing too. Maybe he'll get a chance to come back. I mean, listen, the cheapest Russell ever was on DK I see was $6,200. He's been under that every week. He's been just there, 63 and under every week on DK. I mean, eventually, yeah, he'll have like that. He's going to get you like a 30-point spot. He's not running, which is frustrating. I think he has 9 rushing yards, maybe less. Something crazy. But he's not running. That's the bummer. You were always, we want peppered in. We want that hair on fire Russ, man. We want those 30, 40 extra points, our 30 extra 40 rushing yards, give you those 3 or 4 points. So I mean, it's interesting. That game is like a crazy low total too. The Cardinals aren't running any plays. I think they're averaging 47 plays per game through 3 weeks. Steve Wilkes is coaching with a tinfoil hat on the sideline. They're calling plays. It's just a complete abomination, man. They had 2 touchdowns last week, and it felt like a jubilation, man. Like you can just feel the euphoria washing over Cardinals fans because they scored twice in an NFL football game in 2018 when people are just handing points out to everybody. They said they were going to get David Johnson involved as a receiver more. Guess what? Didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. Shocking.
What? Oh my
God!
I can't believe it.
Dude, he's like, I don't know if he's the new Hugh Jackson or this year's Vance Joseph or what, but like it's. I mean, they are drowning already. It is bad. It is in bad shape. They've got offensive line injuries. They have no playmakers at wide receiver. Larry Fitz is hurt, kind of banged up. They're going to bring Rose in, see what kind of like life that sparks. But I mean, they threw him to the fire. They're like, hey, Rook, 4 minutes to go win us this game.
Good luck, kiddo.
He threw an interception late on the sideline. The very first play of the next drive, he threw a pick 6 that they got bailed out on a defensive penalty where he just completely telegraphed across the field. It's gonna be real curious to see how this plays out for the Cardinals this year.
Well, the worst play call, they benched David Johnson for the most important play of the game.
Well, yeah, hey, you got to get Chase Edmonds some reps.
Oh my God.
You've got to punish your dual threat receiving back for missing a blitz. For missing a pickup on blitz. Scold him.
You have a film session on Monday where you can
Yes.
You do not have to bench your best friggin' player on the most important play of the game. That was I can't remember ever seeing a play call that egregious. I really can't. Giving the ball to Chase Edmonds on the perimeter on 3rd and 2, benching your best player and giving it to your 5th round rookie out of Fordham. I don't think I've ever seen anything that egregious.
Oh, go Cardinals. So other quarterbacks we're looking at this week, Reeves, who you got for us?
So this is like a really good streaming week, and like obviously it's hot for like you have a good streaming week in redraft, it tends to bleed over in DFS, but don't lose sight on some of these top guys. They're in good spots. Old Phillip Rivers is chilling. He's off to the hottest start of his career. He's got the most fantasy points he's ever scored through weeks. The 49ers have a lot of top 10 fantasy quarterback all 3 games. They lost Tricky Dick. Richard Sherman is out. Their defense is horrible. Like they've just been terrible. That team on both sides of the ball has just been ravaged. Like they're hemorrhaging bodies already. They're not getting a pass rush again this season. So I mean, Phillip Rivers at home, huge favorite. Probably looking like another good spot for him. He's not that much. I'm curious to see what happens with Aaron Rodgers, man, because he was the QB 19, the QB 12, playing on his one leg here. But he did face 2 of the better pass defenses in the NFL. I mean, throw out what you saw from the Vikings last week. They're a good defense. Like they got caught either looking ahead or not. Like they're a good defense still. Like there's no way that I'm going to buy that the Vikings are a terrible defense. Everything snowballed and went as bad as it could for them in that game. So I mean, but Rodgers is at home against the Bills in Lambeau. It's the best matchup he's had all season. I'm curious to see what his ownership is. I feel like it's going to be way under what it should be. And it's a team that's still they're lining up in shotgun 95% of the time. They really can't run the ball out of shotgun. And they still have that whole grouping of running backs now that's kind of a gaggle. So I'm really curious to see if Rodgers bounces back and has a good week, because throwing the ball, he's looked fine. He's been fine. He just ran into 2 good defenses, and it was in the rain last week. So I'm on Rivers and Rodgers if you're paying up.
What about you, Evan? Are you on Rivers, Rodgers? Are you on some other guys? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, love Rivers. Again, I really like Russell Wilson against the Cardinals. Cardinals have faced the 3rd fewest pass attempts in the NFL, but they have allowed the 5th highest yards per pass attempt and the 8th most completions of 20-plus yards. Okay, so they're not even facing a lot of pass attempts, but they're just hemorrhaging big plays. And, I don't necessarily have data to back this up through 3 games. I haven't looked it up, but to me, over the past few years, I think the best deep ball thrower in the NFL has been Russell Wilson.
Yep.
Just straight eyeball test, and hey, Deshaun Watson had a great year last year throwing the deep ball, and Aaron Rodgers of course throws an amazing deep ball, but Russell Wilson to me is up there with anyone, and so I think he can really rip that one up, especially if he gets back Doug Baldwin. Mitchell Trubisky has been atrocious, okay? But he's facing the worst pass defense in the NFL by a distance. They start 3 rookies in the secondary. I think the Bears can protect at home against the Buccaneers. The Bucks sadly just lost Chris Conte. I was hoping that he would play.
Thoughts and
prayers.
Prayers.
They had to place him on injured reserve. But I mean, he's like min price on DK, right? Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, but then the problem is there you have to play Mr. Trubisky.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like he's 5,200 over there against Tampa Bay, whose secondary is obviously awful. But again, I just rather play Allen Robinson. Like I'll just play Allen Robinson in this spot, hope that he gets loose. Like I don't have to play Mr. Trubisky for 5,200 when I can pay 5,600, right? And I can just play Eli Manning or Russ Wilson. Like that $400 just doesn't matter enough to me.
Absolutely. Good
All
point.
right. Let's move on to some running backs because we are behind because, well, the Arizona Cardinals will do that to us. Favorite running backs on this slate. Reeves, who you got for us?
Zeke's going to smash, man, this week. He's getting a ton of work. He's getting 98% of the backfield touches. Even with what happened to that Patriots game, the Lions are still dead last in yards per game and yards per carry allowed to running backs. Zeke's getting a ton of passing work, just hasn't manifested in the yards. If he could have stayed in bounds on like a wheel route, he would have like a 60-yard receiving touchdown in that game last week. But he just ran out of bounds for no reason. It's going to be a spot where they get him at home going. He's dropped on like 82 on FanDuel. I feel like that's a pretty good squeeze. Pretty good for him there. So I'm on Zeke.
What about you, Evan? Who are you looking at running back?
Yeah, we talked about Tevin and Gio.
Mm-hmm.
I think those guys are awesome plays. We talked about them at the top in that Bengals-Falcons game that we covered. Chris Carson, man. I mean, the Cardinals,
one of the best special team players on the team.
Cardinals have faced 106 rushing attempts. They just cannot sustain drives, right? So they faced 106 rushing attempts so far. That's 14 more than the second place team in terms of just rushing attempts allowed. And last week we see Chris Carson get 34 touches, which he deserved. I mean, he deserved that. He's better than Rashad Penny right now. Maybe he won't be in 6 games. Maybe he won't be in 2019. But right now, Chris Carson is the Seahawks' best option. They treated him like that last week. And, if the trends kind of hold, I think Chris Carson should get another 25-plus touches against this team that is just hemorrhaging workloads to opposing RBs. Over 30 fantasy points per game allowed to opposing running backs. It's just absurd. I mean, the Cardinals are a team to target with running backs until we see that they aren't.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so
37 touches per game they allow to running backs.
That's because everybody's running up the clock on them because they stink. Yeah. I don't know. I get it with Chris Carson. Maybe I'm just, maybe just because I picked him up, I'm more interested in Rashard Penny moving forward. But I want it to be a Russ week.
Are any of you guys playing Sony?
I don't
thinking about it.
I just hate clicking on the button of a Patriots running back. And I understand they're losing bodies there quick with Burkhead going down, but
are you gonna pick Kenyon Barner? Are you worried about Kenyon Barner this week?
No, I'm not. It's just I know I'm supposed to be interested. I know. It's just I haven't looked at my running back pool too deep yet. I don't have it narrowed down at all. But it's the Dolphins. Are we really scared of the Dolphins? Reeves, what do you think about? Or talk to me about Sonny Michel.
No, I just think it's a curious spot because, obviously people were into him a little bit last week and, they just flat out laid an egg. They flat out dominated the Dolphins, even into the Adam Gase era, in Foxborough. They've won 9 games in a row versus the Dolphins. That rivalry is really weird splits. The Patriots suck in Miami and Miami's terrible in Foxborough. They've won 9 in a row versus the Dolphins in Foxborough by an average of 18 points per game. Feels like a good get-right spot. Maybe they're still a week away. Maybe when this all gets clicking, when they get Edwin back and Gordon's up to full speed, is when we see it really transition. But, I mean, it's hard to believe. Like, the Dolphins have faced the Tennessee quarterbacks, Sam Darnold and Derek Carr to start the year. Like, I mean, it's cool. Like, they're playing well.
Better than those guys.
No, they're playing well, and nothing about what Ryan Tannehill is doing is sustainable. The guy's averaging almost 10 yards of completion and almost has a 10% TD rate on like 23 attempts a game. Things are clicking. They're 3-0. Like, I ain't gonna listen. Take your lap on your wins. I'm not trying to take those away, but a lot of what they're doing doesn't scream sustainability. So I mean, I'm real curious to see. He's a huge home favorite. Vegas didn't come out and pulling punches. They opened it at 7. It opened at 7. So I mean, it's going to be curious to see. So you got a $5,900 back on FanDuel. I think he's 50. He's 50 change on DK. Where it's just him and James White this week. Kenyon Barner is not getting touches. Like, what are they going to do?
So wait, are you not interested in James White too? Then at 5,400?
Yeah, he's safe. I think James White's safe. You know, he's evolved. He leads all running backs in air yards. He's scored a touchdown in 2 of the games. They know he's going to be involved in the capacity. We know he's involved. They don't got any receivers. How are you going to come into an NFL game with 3 active receivers? By the way,
and none of them are really that good. Like they all look terrible. It was unbelievable. Like it was a really weird game to watch. By the way, Sony Michel 4,500 over on DK.
Oh, 45?
Yeah. Look at Reeves. He's like, oh no, I'm rooting for Sony Michel this week. This could get ugly. All right, let's move on to wide receivers real quick because we're running a little bit behind. We got a lot to talk about. Evan, give me some of your favorite wideouts this week.
I don't know. I think we already touched on them all.
We've kind of been going. Kenny Stills, or does Devontae Parker come back scare you against that New England secondary?
No, that Devontae Parker doesn't really matter for Kenny Stills. Just targets matter for Kenny Stills. And, he hasn't had like high volume games. No player on the Dolphins so far has so much as averaged 5 targets per game. They don't throw the ball. Maybe this week they will, but they haven't thrown it so far.
All right. So Reeves, any other wide receivers for you that we haven't touched on? Reeves?
He's on mute.
Reeves muted?
Reeves, sorry. Sorry, man.
Sorry,
getting back in the fold here. You mentioned Allen Robinson. I like him. I mean, 9.3 targets per game against the worst secondary in the league. They've allowed the opposing lead wide receiver to score in every game. Going a step further in that game, I think Taylor Gabriel's kind of interesting. Anthony Miller's out. He's gone from 5 targets to 7 targets to 10 targets. Yeah. We talk about, the Bucs defense. Like, he's kind of interesting. Antonio Callaway is really interesting this week. He had 10 targets last week, 5 from Mayfield when he came in the game. The Raiders are allowing 25% of their completions to go for 20 or more yards. It's the highest rate in the NFL. Kind of an interesting spot. He's min-priced on FanDuel. And then
I want to play him in cash, dude. I want to play him in cash.
Wait, who is this?
Antonio Callaway.
Antonio Callaway.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
He is Santonio Holmes. I'm telling you, man. He's so fast.
I love a good Santonio Holmes reference. That's good. Just, tiptoeing in the end zone.
And I don't think a lot of people realize he had 10 targets last week because his box score sucked, but he dropped the ball and got overthrown on a deep ball. He could have had a real blow-up game in that Thursday night game. In
the preseason, Mayfield hit him for a monster touchdown. That was the game where Hugh Jackson wanted to discipline him and then just played him the entire game. The entire preseason game.
That's a great punishment during the game. That's a great punishment
during the game.
Of course he did. I'll tell you what, if you want to punish somebody, let him play for the Browns for an entire game. I don't mind that. I'm going to say one other guy too, and I'm not completely sold on him yet, but guys, 5,300. He's facing a defense that can get beat by the deep ball. We saw he get a ton of targets last year. He's got 23 targets this year, and I don't think he's going to be popular just because he's been disappointing. Reeves, you know who I'm talking about?
I'm not sure. No,
Corey Davis.
Oh, no chance.
Why not?
Because his quarterback admittedly said he can't fully grasp the football. Corey Davis has the lowest rate of catchable targets out of all NFL receivers with 20 or more targets. When Mariota was forced to play last week, they completely just tried to hide that he couldn't throw.
Yeah, but that's got to get better, right?
I mean, if he's left-handed, maybe if he becomes left-handed, it gets better.
I'm gonna roll the dice a little bit on Corey Davis.
Crane. So I had the pleasure of being assigned for RotoWorld watching the Jaguars Titans game last week.
That's sad.
And today I played catch with my 6-year-old daughter in the backyard. And I remember thinking, like, that pass looks better than the ones that Marcus Mariota was throwing on Sunday. I was really proud of her, gave her a hug, and we went and ate ice cream.
Then you bought her a Mariota jersey and say, you too can play in the NFL. All right, guys, we got to get off here. They just poo-pooed on my Corey Davis. That broke my heart, but I get it. Thank you so much for RotoWorld and RotoGrinders for the show. I'm Eric Crane. He's Evan Silva, and he's Rich Reber. You've been listening to the DFS Pick 6, RotoGrinders.com. See you later.